That's what I need in my life. 3, 2, 1. Back at it again. It's the State of Football here. Part 46 edition, October 5th. NFL Week 4 in the books. College football weekend. We'll have that preview tomorrow with Russell Landy. But today we got Ralph Ventri, of course, the Assistant Commissioner of the Northeast Conference, in the house, joining us for the State of Football. Myself, RIC in the place to be, Ric Serritella, here at the Jersey Shore. John Murphy, Toronto Argonauts Vice President, Director of Player Personnel, fresh off his trip from San Diego. You know, he didn't get a lot of shut-eye last night, and he's going to dive into it. We'll get into some of his weekend journeys over at the Hub, hosted by Don Yee, several NFL teams in attendance, some good talents on hand as these NFL street free agents try to get recognized by NFL teams. We'll talk about that dilemma, some of the COVID-19 protocol, and the shakeup here that COVID-19 is suddenly trying to turn the NFL upside down. We'll tie that into our Monday night previews with an S, because there's 2 Monday night football games tonight along with my New York Yankees. I'm excited about that. Of course, we got the weekend review. We start off last night with maybe the one game that John got a chance to see a little bit of since he's been traveling all weekend. The Eagles 25-20 upend the 49ers. Somewhat of an upset anyway. I think that, you know, as long as the 49ers can lurk and just kind of linger around until Jimmy G gets back, they can be in contention. But the Rams look good. The Seahawks look good. The Cardinals also 2-2. John, I'll leave you with this stat here to open things up. The San Francisco 49ers have now played 26 games with Jimmy Garoppolo. They've also played 26 games without Jimmy Garoppolo. Say what you want about the quarterback. It's the intangibles and knowing how to win. You saw Beathard replace Mullins yesterday, but San Francisco 20-6 when Jimmy G starts, 5-21 when he doesn't.
So we should have taken the Eagles in the points, is what you're saying.
Oh, by the way, on the season, I have John by 1 game going 8-4 yesterday. John going 7-5, a down week for the both of us. I am now 43-17-1 with a 1-game lead over John Murphy.
Now, this is what I get for taking teams like the Dolphins. Although I did correctly say the Bungles would get off the schneid. So if you're a team that's winless, you want me to pick you because you may get off that schneid unless you're the Houston Texans. But that's a whole other story. I think what you saw was, you got to admit, you're hearing a lot of things there, right? Eagles fans and the Eagles media, local and national, do a great job. When they're 3-1, they're the greatest team ever. When they're 0-2-1, it's the worst Eagles, team that they've ever seen. So, I don't think Doug Peterson's seat was ever that hot to begin with. But he certainly did a really good job of showing that, you're looking at a team yesterday. You want to talk about some of the teams who are playing for them. Greg Ward is your number 1 receiver pretty much. The second and third receivers, that are basically a rookie draft pick, and a kid literally off the practice roster. The Niners really didn't give them much with Ertz. Miles Sanders wasn't, the explosive guy, that we've seen at times. Not a big game out of Carson Wentz. So when you hear today that the Eagles win, and then you go look at the box score, you got to give a lot of credit, to the coaching staff for being able to keep those guys in a game. You get down early, you're on the road, and what they were able to do is force some turnovers, which you should be able to do on a second and or third string quarterback. They gave up everything they could to George Kittle, and were just lucky to kind of come out of that, the way that they did. But you see 2 teams right there, both of them, where they have playoff aspirations. But you'd have to say, without getting a host of players back, which they're not going to do, and then the Niners lose Ziggy Ansah on top of it. So the guy they signed to replace a guy who got hurt, he's now out for the year as well. If you're the Niners and you're playing minus all those guys on that side, and you're the Eagles playing with that offensive line for a regular period of time, it's going to be a struggle to see that those 2 teams could really, make the playoffs. I think it gives the Cardinals, a chance to rebound. But then again, it looks like an easy game on paper, but it'll be interesting to see. What did the Cardinals do after the Carolina game? Did they go back to Arizona for safety reasons, or did they stay somewhere east for competitive reasons, knowing they're going to the Jets? Because back-to-back weeks, we saw how that travel went, and the Rams who stayed, the Niners who stayed, one team did it one way. Rams went home, Niners, went to West Virginia. Niners did a good job wrapping up back-to-back wins in New York. Rams had a struggle on the back end. They're going back and forth, crisscrossing the country. It'd be interesting to see how the Cardinals fare in that, but they have a good chance, because of how many injuries you saw with the 49ers. And as we mentioned with the Eagles, you're 3 minutes away from being tied for last. And at 1-2-1, you're in first place by half a game. And the Giants and the Cowboys play each other next week, which means one of those teams is going to get an extra loss, on the docket. So really NFC East, first team to 7. And it's a question of, can the Cowboys win 6, of their remaining games, or can the Eagles win 6? And it's going to come down to that head-to-head matchup. If somebody sweeps, they're going to win the division.
In fact, it might come down to that tie that Doug Peterson played for a couple of weeks ago, giving him the edge. That tie is now the difference in that NFC least that nobody wants to win. And you mentioned, the 49ers down 10 starters, just trying to survive and hang on, could be looking at a third starting quarterback in so many weeks as they get ready for their matchup next week. And the Eagles, again, talk about a 2-deep depth chart. They're 3 deep now on just about every position on that offensive line. So the Eagles come out on top 25-20 on the Sunday night game. Ralph, I know you're giddy. It's been a month of goodness with the Buffalo Bills circling the wagons. One of 2 teams in the league now, 4-0. And this to me was a trip to decide, are you a pretender or a contender? And they go into Las Vegas. They travel cross country. They come out on top 30-23. The score indicates, I think this game was not as close as what the score says it was. Buffalo seemed like, they had control of this game watching from a distance. I didn't get to see it, Ralph. I know you did, and that's why we're going to have you break it down.
Well, I was locked in. I held my breath for a little while when Josh Allen went down after that crazy play to Stephon Diggs. Came down on the left arm, left shoulder, left wrist. Thankful that it was the non-throwing arm, but he went right into the locker room. But luckily came back out about 5 minutes later. And when he was in the game, the Bills' offense was in control again, as usual. The Bills' defense made the big plays when needed. They overall did a pretty good job on Josh Jacobs, who I love. I think he's one of the top 5 running backs in football. They were able to stop him on a big 4th and 1 in the second half. They limited him to right around, I think, 50 or 60 yards rushing at the most. And they got the 2 timely turnovers. Josh Norman playing his first game off IR, a former FCS star at Coastal Carolina. He had a tremendous punch out, just textbook, goes in for the tackle, punches out the football, makes the recovery. And then later on, Quentin Jefferson, the free agent up from the Seattle Seahawks on the Bills defensive line, finally gets home to Derek Carr and gets the strip and the fumble recovery. So the defense really made 2 huge timely plays. If there's one thing I can say is they need a little bit more of a pass rush, but that defense didn't look great in the first 3 games, finally showed some life in Las Vegas for the Bills. Josh Allen and the offense rolling along, and really Stephon Diggs is as advertised. This man is an elite route runner. He is fantastic out of the break, and he's just an exciting player to watch. He made a big boy catch yesterday. Josh Allen threw it deep down the field. Maybe if he would have had a little more on the pass, it would have been a touchdown. But Diggs went up, grabbed what was a 50-50 ball for about a 40-yard gain. Just contested catches that I hadn't seen Bills receivers make in a number of years. Diggs is the best receiver they've had since Eric Moulds, and he's better than Moulds. But with that said, it could have been a trap game for Buffalo. Of course, last week, toward the end of the week, Buffalo is being asked about the Titans game, which is the Week 5 opponent, and all the Titans' positive tests and how they're feeling about possibly playing the Titans in only 9 days. But fortunately for the Bills, they stayed focused on the Raiders, and they got the win on the road. 4-0. I mean, it feels good. It feels good. Hasn't felt this good to be a Buffalo Bills fan in 20 years. Let's just hope they keep the quarterback healthy. And even though the defense hasn't been stellar, I got to think that Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier will find a way to make that a serviceable unit by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Diggs has really changed the complexion of that offense, giving him a legitimate playmaker. So, Ralph, what you're really saying is he's the best receiver they've had since Andre Reed. Whoa. Diggs, what can you say? I mean, it's the deep threat that Josh Allen needed. Josh Allen now ascending in my quarterback rankings, earning the respect. These are the wins, traveling cross country. And now we shall see that game against the Titans, Week 5 in jeopardy. We'll talk more about that later in the show. But Buffalo circling those wagons, 4-0. The Raiders now 2-2. Both teams will be watching tonight's matchup as the Bills monitor the Patriots, and the Chiefs will be hosting the Raiders next week in Week 5. So
the Bills have the Chiefs coming up on Thursday Night Football in Week 6. Bills and Chiefs. That's why if this Titans game were to be delayed at all in Week 5 for the Bills, there'd be a real issue with the scheduling because they're slated to face the Chiefs on a short week in Week 6. So hopefully we get this Titans game off and running. But it looks good. If you guys saw the results this morning, it looks good. Finally, some positive news. No positive test. No new positive test for the Titans today.
Yeah, 10 players, 10 personnel, 20 in total. We'll get to that towards the end of the show here as we discuss the ramifications on the state of football, Part 46. I mentioned it, Buffalo being one team that's 4-0. Seattle, now the other team 4-0, John, with a 31-23 win. They go opposite direction across the country. And, what can you say about this Dolphins team? Now 1-3, it's just a matter of a question of when, not if, Tua gets inserted.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of turnovers there, and the factor that you're playing a Seahawks team where you're kicking field goals and they're scoring 2 touchdowns. So on 4 drives, the Dolphins had a chance to score. They kick 4 field goals. They have 12 points, and the Seahawks throw 2 touchdown passes. On their drives. So you kind of saw, a little bit of the difference in what you're able to do. Got to give, again, the Dolphins a lot of credit, much like a few other teams where the record doesn't indicate the factor that you're seeing growth week in and week out from the team. How different will this look with Tua in the lineup? And does the factor that some young quarterbacks, like how Joe Burrow is playing, the way you've seen Herbert play for San Diego, and giving those clubs a little extra juice, in terms of how competitive they've been in those games, do the couple of turnovers that they had and kicking all those field goals, does it lead to a kind of a quicker move to Tua to say, like, hey, that's really where our next step has to come? At 1-3, and we've been in 2 of these games, and we could have closed out and won either of them, but we're just not scoring any points. The factor that you do have Tua in there, and if he is in there, he gives you the run pass option, gives you a bigger play capability. You have some weapons when Devontae Parker, is healthy. Do they get to that time sooner? I think the one thing you have to say is, the factor that they kept the Seahawks in check, in terms of this didn't get to a 40 or 50 point game, and get out of hand. They definitely seem bought into what Coach Flores is preaching and talking, to them about. So what it's really going to come down to is everyone has had their opinion of Tua on the injured list. Now he's not on the injured list. He hasn't taken any live hits. What to do next? It really boils down to, what are the Dolphins and their brass and their front office and their ownership? How anxious are they to see him on the field? How anxious are they to see him take a hit? Right? So those two things are going to go hand in hand because unless you're finding the right opportunity, and I would say this, from what we saw last week, the Jets may look like the right opportunity, but you put him in there against Greg Williams, he's going to get hit. So be careful what you ask for because there's never going to be the right opportunity, to put Tua in. If there's any reservation this year that he needed a redshirt year for the injury, then you won't see him until the much, much later. But like I said, there's a couple of those teams that are 1-3 that competitively you would have to say you're seeing a lot of the things you want to see. And I think the Dolphins are one of them. It's hard at 1-3 when you're seeing how well the Bills are playing and, the Patriots are the Patriots, it doesn't really matter who's playing for them. They're playing well, so I think it's a tough road to think that they're a playoff contender at 1-3, even though they're one game back, but they are definitely headed seemingly in the right direction.
Yeah, I think week 11 is their bye week. I think that would be as good a week as any. And I think the fact that you don't see him here 1-3 traveling to San Francisco next week against the vulnerable 49ers team, which is a winnable game, I think it is the hesitancy. I think it is the fact that they do want to at least semi-redshirt him. Otherwise, this action facing the live bullets would be invaluable, right? Because you've got the foundation built. You've got a somewhat formidable defense without any, true cornerstone type of players. They're overachieving there. It's just can we put some points on the board, convert some of these field goals into touchdowns, and hey, maybe it's a different story. But I think because of the injury, you are not seeing Tua. And oh, by the way, we'll try to get to it later in the show. Burrow and Herbert, man, oh man, the potential that these guys are showing. If Tua lives up to the hype, what an incredible QB class this could turn out to be. Obviously, the indications are very, very early, and we've got a long ways to go. We are rocking and rolling, moving and grooving, chocking and jiving here on the State of Football, Part 46, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. We are live on Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, Twitterverse. If you are on YouTube and Facebook especially, please feel free to chime in, drop us a comment. We are a live interactive show, and we will answer your questions. The Browns, Ralph, rolling now 3-1. It's bananas in Cleveland as they go down to Dallas in a shootout. The Cowboys, it seems like they're going to shoot them out and let the points fall where they may be. But, this Dallas team seems like they can't stop anybody. The Browns getting touchdown passes from Jarvis Landry. You hear Odell Beckham can wing it and fling it. Baker Mayfield, maybe the third best quarterback on the team. But this Browns team can score some points now. 49-38. Suddenly, when was the last time Cleveland was 3-1? I don't know. We need our research department to go back and look this one up.
Well, the Browns are definitely exceeding my expectations. I know they have a ton of talent on paper, but I was still skeptical they were going to be able to put it all together, even with the new coach, the new regime. But Baker has done what he needed to do so far. 3-1. Every road win in the NFL is a big one. Certainly going into a Dallas, a team that needed a win. But the Browns definitely exceeding expectations. Very creative yesterday with the play calling. Obviously, their two most noteworthy plays. One was a pass from Jarvis Landry to Odell Beckham. The other was an end around, Odell Beckham scoring on a play that I don't know what the Cowboys defense was doing on, but certainly, as you mentioned, OBJ is back. He is alive. He has a pulse. Browns are 3-1, but I don't know, is the bigger story in this one the Browns, or is it the Cowboys falling to 1-3? The Cowboys, they're a fantasy player's dream They pile up yards, they pile up points, but they just can't lock up any victories. And it has to be driving Jerry Jones crazy. But with all that said, they're a half a game off of the division lead. So because they play in such a poor division, they can fool themselves into thinking they'll be a contender all year long. They may make the playoffs. They may win that division. But if the Dallas Cowboys want to be taken seriously, they have to find something on defense. And really, they have some good players. Lawrence is a great player. Aldon Smith had sort of a resurgence for them in the first few weeks of this season. But I like the rookie, Trayvon Diggs. But the results aren't there. So Dallas struggling. It's got to be driving Jerry crazy. And meanwhile, the Browns, 3-1 through the first quarter of the season. Surprising, I guess you would say, maybe. But who would have thought that after week 4, we'd be talking about this game with the Browns being 3-1, Cowboys being 1-3? I don't know what the odds would have been on that.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Browns now host the 3-1 Browns now host the 3-1 Colts this upcoming week. And hey, they beat the Colts. Suddenly this Browns is a playoff contender. And, don't count. I know we're quick to throw dirt on Mike McCarthy in that Cowboys grave. But like you said, Ralph, this team is still in contention. Just what the doctor ordered, a game against the Giants, whose offense can make any defense look good. So the Cowboys probably going to go to 2-3 there.
I got to say, Rick, though, I feel bad for the Giants, man. They're like a 3-legged dog. They're fighting. They got a little scrap, but they just don't have the personnel. They are just undermanned. And I don't feel too bad. I mean, they've won 4 Super Bowls. So, and growing up in the New York area, everybody thinks the Giants are great, big blue. So I don't feel too bad. But, I mean, it is tough to watch them. I mean, they're scrapping, but at the end of the day, they're going to come away empty.
Well, I'll say this about the Giants, just from traditionally, they were so good for so long, and now expectations have fallen so drastically that we're actually, the media anyway, the local media, it's like, congrats, you were competitive. Hey, we showed effort. Like, that's how low the expectations have fallen for this organization. It's sad to see. Blake Martinez is your best player. Think about that.
I mean, the entire division is 1-9 in their last 10 games played. Right? Ralph just mentioned they have 4 Super Bowls. The entire division leads the world in Super Bowls in their careers. The history of the NFL, 13 Super Bowls out of that division. It is bad.
Really bad.
Bad. And the one thing you would have to say, though, if I gave you that schedule from the jump, COVID or no COVID, preseason, no preseason, you knew a couple of things. They were playing around with the Prescott deal the whole offseason, that you had to wait to see if you could do anything else. So at the finish line, you didn't have money for a real safety. You didn't have money to get Clowney or another real pass rusher, which is why they did the Aldon Smith and double down with trying to get Randy Gregory, back. And it wouldn't be shocking if they let him back in the NFL. David Irving will end up back on the Cowboys as well, at some point. So you were going to go in with a guy who played a lot of special teams in Thompson as one of your defensive starters, a rookie or second-year guy as one of your corners. Their whole offensive line is in a mess. So even though you have those weapons, you can see where at times when they get a second to block, you see something, but then the other parts of the time, it's a jumble. And if 2 out of your first 4 games were West Coast trips to the Rams and to Seattle, there's a shot that 2-2 is what you would have looked at. So at 1-3, like I said, I mean, they're in that same scenario this year as the the Texans have been and that them and the Eagles have been in the last couple of years, which is they're not winning any of the games that are against anybody that's equal or better. They're just beating the teams on their schedule that they can man, in terms of the Cowboys' top 10 players are better than anybody on the Giants. They'll win that game. Yesterday, the Cowboys' best 10 players are similar to what the Browns have, but the Browns have a whole offensive line. The Browns have run for 800 plus yards, somehow this season. And the thing you have to look at is that week 1 loss, right? I mean, you would have to look at it and say a lot of people, ourselves or myself included, would have had the Browns down like 25-32 after what it looked like against the Ravens. It shows you that Stefanski and what those guys are preaching there, it's not fallen on deaf ears like it has in the past in Cleveland, because they've come back and week 2, they played better. Week 3, they played better than week 2. And now yesterday, for the most part, they played even better than week 2 and 3. They are now averaging in the top 10 in offense, in the top 1% of rushing offenses in the NFL, and that's after getting obliterated by the Ravens week 1. So that game next week, when you have the Bills and the Titans, and you have the Colts and the Browns, the two teams coming out of that are in driver's seats, to win their division and to, be high playoff contenders there, because that means with the Colts, playing, and the Bills, playing in that, as well, and the Titans, the Colts have a shot with the Bills win to be in first place in their division, and the Browns have a chance to be the best non-division leader in terms of records at that point. And you're starting to put some mileage between you when you're winning the games that are not those layup games in your division. That's going to help the Browns out, because you got one more time with the Ravens. The Steelers games aren't going to be easy. And now you can tell that second Bengals game is not going to be a layup the way the first one was.
Yeah, and, I'll just wrap up my final Giants thought because I don't want to spend too much time on them. But you've seen now what I've been trying to tell you. Daniel Jones under pressure just ain't happening. And I'll tell you this, Eli Manning, remember him? Sorry to tell you, Giants fans, better quarterback. Now, Daniel Jones, he can make that, elusive, twirl out, that one play where he gets out of the sack, he gains 20 yards rushing. Eli Manning ain't doing that, okay? But I'll tell you what, Giants fans underappreciative of how quickly Eli Manning not only got rid of the ball, but also knew how to react under pressure. And you're seeing Daniel Jones, when he should be throwing the ball away, he's running straight into defenders and taking sacks. He's creating turnovers, and he looks lost and confused. All of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence looks like a great option. And I'll tell you what, Giants and Jets, they're the two vying for that number 1 pick. All right. Speaking of throwing dirt on the grave, the Texans now 0-4, Johnny. They lose to the Vikings 31-23. Bill O'Brien, it seems like, is a common theme now. Does he get through the season?
Well, I think here's one of the same things is you're so far down the road now. If you were the Texans organization and you had any reservations about Bill O'Brien, if you now say, well, now this is what makes it be too much for me to, or this is what changes my opinion. Okay, so now you got the Jaguars coming in. They've been the Jaguars, right? You've seen a little good things. And then you've seen their total personnel, is not up to snuff to really be competitive, but they'll play as well as they can play, and Minshew makes a few plays, but they have some good young talent. If the Jaguars come to town and the Jaguars beat you, you have to seriously consider what it is that you've built your entire franchise around Bill O'Brien. Because make no mistake, this team is not built around Deshaun Watson. This entire franchise is built around Bill O'Brien. because you have gotten rid of any player that doesn't coexist, any player that he has decided is not worth the money for what they're doing. You got rid of a more than serviceable GM in Brian Gaine, who, oh, by the way, is in Buffalo. And last time I looked, they're doing pretty good. And where he came from was doing pretty good. And guess what else the Texans were doing when Brian Gaine was the GM? Doing pretty damn good. So you've gone completely backwards from where you were. You don't often see teams winning a division on the regular, at least making the playoffs, and at times hosting and losing wild card and early round matchups in the playoffs. But you had Hopkins, Clowney. You got to start looking at some of the moves over a longer period of time and say the decisions to move away. And Rick Smith had other things that are totally off the field. God bless, for the family situations he was dealing with. But then you bring in Brian Gaine to work with him, and that doesn't work out. You have a Hopkins issue. That doesn't work out. You've traded for Tunsil. You're 0-4, and you still owe a first and second round pick, if I'm not mistaken, next year as well. So you are down the road to the point where if you're the Houston Texans and we're asking whether or not you get rid of Bill O'Brien, what will have changed their mind just because you're now not winning the games? Now, that might be the game changer, is that you're not winning games. Bill O'Brien might be safe as long as he's winning the division, even if everybody in the world questions his decisions. But the most questionable decision has been, like it or not, and they will never admit it, and there's not enough scientific or paperwork proof to show it. What the Texans were trying to do was they were trying to hire, which they did, a business-related person from the Patriots, which then was supposed to lead to a certain person on the Patriots in the Patriots front office following to become the next GM. You got caught with your hand in the cookie jar and got rid of a serviceable and more than serviceable GM in Brian Gaine, thinking that you were going to outsmart everybody, got your hand caught in the cookie jar so you couldn't hire the guy, and by default ended up with Bill O'Brien as your head coach GM, and oh, by the way, decides last week that he should be more involved back with the offensive play calling. And in the first half of yesterday's game, you had a total of 6 points. So the more we get Bill O'Brien involved, the further we're getting in debt if we're the Houston Texans trying to compete in a division where the Colts are a better team, especially on defense. The Titans are a better team as long as they're healthy and not COVID infected. And the Jaguars' younger talent is nipping on the heels of the Texans, who have none of their young guys playing and don't have a first or second round draft pick next year. When you're sitting at 0-4, that is a really hard road to come back from.
Yeah, and, the aforementioned hand in the cookie jar, I assume you're talking about Nick Caserio there up at the Patriots, who was not allowed out of his contract, turned down the Texans job, and now you're hearing even the de facto GM, Jack Easterby, he may stay if O'Brien gets the can, which would be somewhat ironic since that's O'Brien's guy. But, I think they need to gut the entire organization from top to bottom and re-identify themselves. It's just like the Giants. You can't keep shipping out all your star talent and replacing them with retreads. It just doesn't work. And you've got to be able to manage egos and deal with the drama that is the NFL. I mean, there's more drama in the NFL than the freaking soap operas, okay? The state of football, Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventri, breaking it down for the people here each and every Monday, the NFL week review. We'll preview Monday night's games. Tomorrow we've got Russell Landy, who will be on deck to talk all the college football action and, just some news and notes from around the league before we get into those Monday night football matchups here. The Panthers, kudos to Coach Matt Rule. I thought it would take some time for him to put some W's on the board. This team's 2-2. with a couple winnable games coming up. And, they take care of the Cardinals 31-21, both teams now 2-2 on the season. The Colts, we talked about them going to 3-1. They defeat the Bears. Nick Foles' magic runs out. But, hey, don't look now. Chicago's still 3-1 with Minnesota underachieving, the Lions out of it. They're still in contention there. I don't think they're going to dethrone the Packers, but they're going to be in the mix for the wild card. They're, at 3-1, even if they go 6-6 the rest of the way, that's 9 wins. The Bengals, as John called it, we both had them. They take care of business. Joe Burrow, another 300-yard passing game. I think now the first rookie ever to have 300 yards passing in his first 3 starts. Pretty impressive stuff. The Saints 35-29 over the Lions. The Lions were actually up in front, I think 14-0 at one point. Saints come storming back. Drew Brees, who I've got bombarded by uneducated football fans telling me he's not a top 5 quarterback in the league anymore. Give me a break. He hits 9 different receivers, shows why Drew Brees does what Drew Brees does. And, both him and Tom Brady, 38-31, the Bucs taking care of business against the Chargers. Nate Burleson eating crow. I mean, I watched this game here. The Buccaneers went into the halftime trailing. Tom Brady throwing a pick 6, Nate Burleson at halftime turning to Boomer Esiason. Hey, Tom Brady, going back to his last 6 games, has a pick 6. Looks like that nickel and dime offense isn't working too well. Yeah, there's a whole nother half to be played, Nate. Did you see the balls? Woo! All over the field, Tom Brady. But, again, you can't say enough good things about Justin Herbert. What you saw from that young man in this ball game, it was a glimpse of things to come. And he went, toe-to-toe in a shootout with Tom Brady. Justin Herbert, you even saw Anthony Lynn on the sidelines there, just kind of some of those throws, like he read the look on his face, like, we're not going back to Tyrod Taylor, that's for sure. Ravens 31-17, take care of business there against the interstate rival. Baltimore going to 3-1. Coach Ron Rivera, man, I appreciate the gutsy willingness to want to be there and gut through this thing. But, man, when you've got to go get the IV bags just to make it to the game, they say, you're literally leaning on the staff just to take a phone call from upstairs. Like, go get yourself right. Please, do us all a favor. Get right, okay? And then the Rams 17-9. Again, the family affair there. Jalen Ramsey, I would say, got the better of Golden Tate. That tackle, textbook style. It was like a WWF move, slamming Golden Tate to the ground. I know it didn't sit well with him. Of course, the fracas there at the end of the game. Again, just undisciplined. You knew this was coming by Golden Tate's comments. You heard him on social media replying to just some random user, say, hey, Jalen Ramsey still got to see me after the game. Well, maybe there should be some accountability there with the discipline of this team. I'm just saying. And then, you got the Rams now 3-1, ram it, and the Giants falling to 0-4. So there is your recap. Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventri. Let's get into Monday Night Football. Before we do, the COVID situation
I think there was somebody right here a couple weeks ago after Justin Herbert's unexpected debut. I told you Chargers have a QB controversy, and now it's not even a controversy. That job belongs to Justin Herbert. And I feel bad for Tyrod Taylor because he's a good guy. He works hard. He really is an incredible athlete. As far as a quarterback, he's not incredible, but he's an incredible athlete. And here he falls victim to the team doctor puncturing his lung. You can't make it up. That's out of the you can't make it up category. And I feel for the team doctor too, obviously. But I believe I told you I was a Justin Herbert believer a few weeks ago. So just wanted to pat myself on the back for that one. And absolutely, I got to say on Jalen Ramsey, whatever is going on between him and Golden Tate, I'm not jumping into that soap opera, but I can tell you Jalen Ramsey's never winning the NFL's Sportsman of the Year award. That's for sure. So I don't think anybody wouldn't really expect anything different out of Jalen Ramsey.
No, he does win the Deion Sanders trash talking award though, for sure.
Yeah. But you do know one thing. I'll say this: you can't say you can't allow it to happen. You can't be that disconnected to your own players after the game or during the game or prior to the game to not have, when you see the Rams afterwards, their director of player relations was in there and on Ramsey, and right afterwards, like, brought him back from 12 down to probably a 7.5, to get him at least on the bus, because Jalen Ramsey is still in full uniform trying to go for round 3.
Right.
Like, this made it from the pregame to the field, to the postgame, to the locker room, to the street. But I will say this: Golden Tate street cred is at 100, because you're not just telling me that if you're disrespectful, I'm going to come get you. I came and got you right there on the 50. I'll say that. Golden Tate, you better believe him. If he's a man of his word, he told you, you keep running your mouth, I'm going to come get you. And you know what? Now he's going to have to serve his penalty for it, because there's no doubt. And we'll go right from that to the COVID. But for sure, somebody's getting at minimal a massive fine, because you cannot have something that happened outside of football on the field. You can't have that be the reason it's happening, because the targeting could be a whole other scenario, right? If this is Jalen Ramsey as the DB going against Tate, and it was Ramsey with the issue, you're talking about, horrifically injuring somebody on the field if you took your personal issue and targeted them, because at some point Golden Tate could be a defenseless player on the field. So you can't have this going on and allow it to happen. So it's bad. It's a bad look for the NFL, and it's a bad look for both teams, because you knew that this was festering, because it's been festering for a year between these guys. You had to do a better job of policing this on the sideline at the end of the game to be like, hey, that clock hits 0. You get Jalen Ramsey off the field, or you get Golden Tate corralled, or send them off, to not allow that to happen. That, to me, that was that, I understand that the players should control themselves, but that's a bad look on both organizations.
Well, the two things here. The NFL has banned the jersey swap between players after the game, and now you got guys spitting all over each other after the game at midfield. So you have to think that there is going to be some serious ramifications.
Well, they were still trying to do a jersey swap, just they were trying to completely rip it off each other. That's
exactly old hockey style, pulling a sweater over the head. And the other thing is too, if you have a problem with another individual on another team, that's for outside the lines, okay? Don't bring that into the game. That's selfish to pull that in to the team environment here. Just really selfish behavior by both of those men.
Yeah, because
you have to expect better by professionals. And if you had a problem with the guy, hit him with a nice, clean football play on the field in between the lines, okay? And save the extracurricular stuff for out at the off season, because just selfish behavior.
Because the guy that was in more jeopardy than anybody is Nick Gates for being a hell of a teammate.
Yeah, I want to know where that play was all game long. I mean, all of a sudden Nick Gates, he's throwing guys out the club. Where was that all game long? I mean, come on, Nick. Where were you during the first 60 minutes? I'll say this, because I know we're running out of time, and Ralph, you got to get going here soon, I know. But I'll tell you this, I haven't seen East Coast, West Coast beef like that since Tupac and Biggie Smalls. On here. All right. We are lucky to have the Northeast co-commissioner, Ralph Ventri. I know you've got an important conference meeting coming up here, Ralph. So we will let you preview the Falcons at Packers, and then get your thoughts quickly on the COVID. But first, Atlanta 0-3, traveling into Green Bay 3-0. Do the Falcons stand a shot here?
I don't know. I was high on the Falcons coming into the season, but that has quickly changed with the two 15-point fourth quarter leads that have evaporated. 0-3, they're in desperation mode. Really, the thing that I'm most interested in this game, and it's the fantasy football that has taken over my life. That angle, I'm excited to see Davante Adams and Julio Jones hopefully go at it and compete tonight. I did see reports that Julio and Calvin Ridley will play for Atlanta. Not sure about Davante Adams. I know the Packers are usually pretty cautious. I also believe the Packers are going into a bye, so maybe they hold Davante out for some extra time to make sure he's completely healthy, or maybe they just unleash him tonight because they're shorthanded at that position to begin with. Alan Lazard, who had the big game in Adams' absence last week for Green Bay, Lazard is now on IR. So hopefully we'll see Julio Jones and Davante Adams both out there because they are two of the top 5 receivers in the NFL, and it will be pretty cool to see them on the same field. So do the Falcons have a shot? I don't think so. The Packers are a really good football team, but maybe Atlanta, with the desperation factor, they can put up some points. Maybe they pull it out. But I would have to go with Green Bay tonight. But like I said, the thing I'm most excited to see, and I'm sounding like a fantasy football junkie here, is I want to see a healthy Julio Jones and a healthy Davante Adams because not only are they good for my fantasy teams, but that's just good for the game to see two elite players out there in a primetime matchup.
No doubt. Two organizations trending in different directions. I think there's going to be some points on the board in this one. Ralph, before we let you go, John's going to preview the Patriots at Chiefs. Obviously, this game being moved due to the Cam Newton positive test. We also saw a false positive with Michael Burton that nearly put the Saints game in jeopardy. You are hearing now that a lot of the team personnel has contacted Roger Goodell in hopes of slashing the interdivisional rivalries. So instead of playing your division rivals twice a year, it would be limited to one game a year. In my opinion, quickly here, I think those are the games you should keep because they are close in travel proximity.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I don't care what the coaches or GMs or whoever's saying, it's not happening. The NFL is going to do everything they can to have every team play 16 games. They've already come this far. They've completed over, about 62 regular season football games already. They went through a training camp with not many COVID casualties. They're at the point now that they're not going to just say, oh, let's play it conservative and cut out 4 weeks of TV money. It's not happening. They'll have teams play 3 games in 8 days before they give up those TV slots. And I honestly think that everybody going into the season, I would hope that everybody in the league, in the NFLPA, in the team administration, I hope that they would be under the impression that this is the COVID season and there are going to be some bumps here and there, and there are going to be some roadblocks we have to navigate around, and equity, quote unquote, across the board, competitive equity or competitive imbalance, is going to exist at some point this year, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And there's going to be an advantage to the teams, whether it's by following protocol or just by luck. There's going to be an advantage for the teams that stay healthy and stay free of COVID. And you're going to be the schedule was always going to have to be flexible at some point. Now, with 16 games in 17 weeks, there isn't a great deal of flexibility, but obviously there are different ways they can pull it off. And if worse comes to worse, they can add a week 18 and a week 19. They can add week 18 and still have the Super Bowl go off as scheduled because you eliminate the Pro Bowl week. So really, the NFL is going to go forward with 16 games. And I think, it was a little bit of a scare with the Titans outbreak, the Titans cluster, and then those positives popping up with Patriots and Kansas City. But I say everybody has to look at this from the 30,000-foot view here. And when you do that, you'll notice that the NFL has really done a remarkable job. If you put it in perspective, I believe they said they had over 420,000 tests. And outside of the Titans cluster, they had 10 players test positive over those 420,000 tests. I mean, that's an incredibly low percentage. It's a lot lower than any of the general population. It's a lot lower COVID positivity rate than any state in the United States. And yes, they have to figure out how this Titans cluster popped up and try to prevent another one. But they've done a remarkable job if you really look at it objectively here. And the other thing is, good news today, the Titans finally a day with no new positives. Reports coming out this morning that it's the first time in 7 days they had no new positives. So now they have to do the same tomorrow, 2 days in a row of no new positives. And then they can finally talk about getting that facility opened and playing Titans-Bills in week 5. And then, of course, you heard the good news this morning from the Patriots. They're on the plane going to Kansas City. I'm sure John will talk about what that same-day travel might do, if anything. It definitely takes them out of routine, but no new positives for the Patriots. They're on the plane. The Saints, false positive. They retested twice. They actually cleared that player, that fullback, to play in the game. And what it goes to show you is that the protocols work. You follow the protocols, you work, they work, and you'll be able to play football. And that's what's happening here. Of course, there's a couple bumps in the road, but the NFL will navigate around it, believe me. And they are not even going to – they'll want to talk to the teams today to reinforce the importance of following the protocols, and they may want to explore some contingency plans with the teams today. But I can tell you right now, Roger Goodell isn't even touching a 12-game season. That's not even coming up on the conversation today. He'll shut that right down. But with that said, guys, what a great feeling to chop it up with you guys on a Monday morning. I can't believe week 4 is almost in the books. So thanks for having me. And, now John will get to preview that Chiefs-Pats game because it's happening, baby. Can't stop, won't stop. So, somebody once told me that, baby. Can't stop, won't stop.
Spoken like a true commissioner. He's our commissioner here at the State of Football, and now he
assistant commissioner. Don't give me a promotion yet, okay? Assistant commissioner. So now I got to get to some NEC work.
Football on the State of Football show. You are our commissioner. You're the people's commissioner, Ralph. I know you got other real commissioner duties to attend to there at the Northeast Conference, so we appreciate you taking the time to chop it up with us. Of course, follow him at NEC Ralph. And a month of NFL season in the books. Who better to chop it up with than Ralph Ventri?
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Appreciate it there. Ralph, okay, well, before we get into that Patriots-Chiefs game, John, you heard him say, I have to tend to agree with him. Goodell, he don't have eyeballs. He's got dollar signs in his eyes, and I don't think that there's any chance of them trimming the season here. They'll do what they have to do to get it in. But we're seeing, again, 20 positives on the Titans, 10 on the staff side, 10 on the player side. The Cam Newton is a weird one, just an isolated incident. Eventually, we're going to find out how this all happened, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that that they're going to probably have to come back with again is, you heard last week the officials association come out and say they had an issue with John Harbaugh pulling his mask down to argue a call. You saw yesterday Pete Carroll trying to get the, officials' attention about the fact that Russell Wilson's headset in his helmet wasn't working and he pulled it down. Gruden's doing it on the regular, as well. And then I think, what we're seeing on the Titans side is that there's a possibility that certain things were not followed perfectly in terms of should you or should you not have brought certain personnel to that game against Minnesota. And then on the flip side, the possibility is how you process a practice roster player onto the practice roster without giving it enough time may have turned and proved costly. If you got signed on Thursday and you failed COVID on Saturday, there may be an issue there with how that player got processed, and was everything followed to the letter of the law, or did somebody get a little too progressive or a little too excited to get things done? And if that's the case, we've seen what happened with the face masks and the coaches and the teams. That was $100,000 per person and $250 per team. If it turns out that you did something, even by cautious mistake or overlooking something, and for a competitive reason, instead of telling the NFL 2 weeks ago, hey, we may not have our whole defensive coaching staff. Hey, we don't have enough practice roster players for the following week, because really the guys you're signing at the end of each week are to prevent injuries for the following week so that they can compete and play. You're going to get burned badly. So if this turns out that the Titans made any mistake, clerical mistake, opportunity mistake, or competitive mistake going to that Vikings game and trying to win and overlooking any step, we're going to talk about $1 million, and we're going to talk about them losing a draft pick. And oh, by the way, we're not going to be talking about a 7th round pick. We're going to be talking about a real draft pick.
Yep. No doubt.
Or we're going to be talking about a guy getting a suspension for lack of institutional control. And it's going to fall under a category that bad. And those of coaches that keep pulling it down, and it's the normal thing to do. Trust me, I did it a few times almost on Saturday. It's normal in conversation to try to pull up and down, and stuff like that. So, I think that's a dangerous road, to take. And I think tonight's games, Atlanta's defense.
Hold on 1 second. Let me set that up for you, because I wonder how much of that Isaiah Wilson, the lack of discipline, right? The other players on the team saying, well, hey, nothing happened to him. And again, I think it comes back to the head coach. So if there is something there, I think the hammer comes down on Vrabel. I think the hammer comes down with the loss of draft pick. And then you've got the Patriots, from where I understand the NFL sent an investigation out to the facility because they're in violation of protocol. And now you're hearing, I'll set you up for tonight's game, as Ralph alluded to, New England departing this morning on 2 separate planes, one plane carrying this group of 20 players who we think came in contact with Cam Newton, who, oh, by the way, might test positive. We've got them on a separate plane, and then we've got the other 60 players and coaches on a second plane. Must be nice to have that Bob Kraft money, by the way. Taking those planes out to Florida to the massage parlors, double down on the travel itinerary here. But again, the COVID protocol, the travel on the same day. Take it away, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw the travel and the delays with the Saints, yesterday. Not knowing fully what was going to happen. Guys worried that they were getting tested and who may or may not be available, and stuff. I think that's a problem. is that, you didn't know and they didn't know. I think that was part of why the first quarter, for the Saints yesterday kind of looked like, they were still in bed, and the Lions were ready to go. And then once it evened out, you got a different result. For the Patriots, how they roll, right? They're a no-nonsense team. They've known that this was going to be the situation. Belichick's not going to allow that, to affect things. They did push the game back. Part of that's TV. Part of that was for travel, and to make sure everything was going to be a go. Bottom line is, whoever's playing quarterback for New England tonight, their biggest job is to turn around and hand off, try to control the game clock, no turnovers or one at maximum, because the Patriots have gone 2-1 against Mahomes. How they have done that is one game was 35 minutes, almost 36. The other one was 43 minutes of controlling the game clock, and having the ball all that time. Now, you're going to do it without Sony Michel. That's tougher. But there's also a chance we might see an NFL, debut of Damian Harris, which has been a rare sight to see. So you have Buckhalter, back. You have Hoyer being able to run that offense. Just you can't have the turnovers that Hoyer sometimes has, because he gets a little giddy that he's on the field, and he starts throwing, balls into coverage. If the Patriots are going to win, it's going to be because that works, and the way they covered Waller and the Raiders is the way you have to cover those guys on the Chiefs. Keep Kels from being wide open down the middle, and then try to contain those outside guys. I'd really like to go with the Patriots, because I think that would be a way to even our score for the week. But it would only be because I'd be doing that. I think Kansas City, there's still too much firepower there. With Cam Newton, I would have said they could have pulled this off. If Belichick can pull this one off, you're going to really have fans of other teams that are in that same 2-1, 2-2, 3-1, just, amazed by what it could be. But that's the recipe is keep the ball away from a prolific offense like that, because the time that the Patriots had the ball for 25 minutes and the Chiefs had it for 35, we know what the result of that game was, and it was the Chiefs beating the Patriots. I see the factor that the score component won't be out of context, but I just don't think the Patriots have enough, to get it done, over the length of a game. But, 31, 20-something, in that line, where the Chiefs could pull away, at the end type thing is more of the game that I see. The other one, I just don't think Atlanta has enough on defense. We've seen Aaron Rodgers make do, with his extra guys. You'll see a Malik Taylor potentially, if they activated a Reggie Begelton or other off the practice roster. They use Tyler Ervin a little bit as a gadget guy, dumping the ball off to him. You may see a little more action. A.J. Dillon, right? They may get the running game, going a little bit more after they get up on them. The good news for the Falcons is you don't have to worry about a second half collapse. You probably have to worry about a first half shootout. And I'm not sure you have the ability to cover, what the Packers are doing, not because of who's out on the field, but because they're doing an excellent job with their, moving guys around and getting guys open, and they get their tight ends open, they get the backs, going, and then they're able to play action. And Aaron Rodgers is just able to put the ball, right on those receivers. So one week it's Alan Lazard, another week it's Robert Tohan, another week it's a lot of Aaron Jones. I think it's too much Packers, and it's a 2-score game in my books.
Don't forget about my guy Scantling Valdez there, the speedster we had at the Cosgrove.
Number one receiver tonight.
Well, hey, I'll say this. I think the Falcons have a better chance with the upset, considering Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard not expected to play, according to our super producer Samantha. Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are expected to play. So I think it comes down to the end, maybe one of these Monday night miracles that you see Aaron Rodgers with the Hail Mary coming down at the end. I wouldn't put it past them. I've also got the Packers and the Patriots tonight. I just think I agree with John. Too much firepower over the long haul. to keep up for 48 minutes. I will say this. I'll go on the record and say this. If the Patriots win, if the Patriots beat the Chiefs with Brian Hoyer at quarterback, they are now my Super Bowl favorites. I'll say that much, okay? The state of football here, wrapping it up. John, I know you were in San Diego over the weekend. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow when we have Russell Landy, the Hub football event for pro free agents, a showcase hosted by Don Yee, about 50 street free agents, took to San Diego, multiple NFL teams in attendance, yourself also in attendance. We've talked about these different hubs and bubbles sprouting up all over the country. This one providing a big value in the marketplace. When you talk about the COVID, you talk about these tryouts on Tuesdays. Here's a way now for teams to evaluate players, not have to bring them into the building, not have to put them up in a hotel for 3 days while they await the COVID test. I think this is something that is really going to be moving forward that NFL teams are interested in.
Right. So Don Yee conceptually, at first, this was something last year. They did it as a proponent of a possible league or a possible look at providing an alternative, to players that needed it, whether it was college kids, or free agents, to keep them active, keep them, in the available for NFL teams. Now you add in the COVID situation. So obviously you want to shrink down the amount of time and the amount of guys that are around each other. So a couple of things I thought that were very interesting in terms of what we're dealing with right now. Number one, that every one of those kids was COVID, negative. They had taken tests. They had, done that. Every kid that walked up, had to fill out that survey about the COVID, take a temperature, and be cleared. They also limited each group, right? So one group was warming up, another group was waiting. So you never had everybody on the field at the same time. You had two different groups. They had people there. So every football, every cone, every bag, everything was disinfected in between the drills as the next group was coming. One group's doing the introduction, the other group's, getting off the field and things like that. The biggest thing you heard all day, if you watch a Peyton Manning game, you got used to a whole lot of Omaha. If you're out at that hub workout, evaluating it, you got to hear Tom Goodines, telling everybody on the field, make sure you have your mask up, all the time. So, you saw a lot of the things to know that this dynamic can work. The other thing you saw was that each position group could kind of stand on its own in the sense of, to draw 4 NFL teams or any NFL teams to something like this, verifying who you're bringing to it before you put them out on the field means that you're cutting out that work for the NFL teams, who now have a chance to just come and evaluate and take a look at the guys that were there, as opposed to having it kind of as a blind group of guys that you invite, that you haven't vetted, you haven't done any kind of, preview of them to know what you're dealing with. And then I thought their availability to update their information on the fly, have that available to the clubs that were in attendance so that you could hopefully do and see your evaluation on Saturday and have these kids ready to go to NFL workouts come Monday or Tuesday. One of the guys, Kelly Bryan, who they had on their list, had already received a workout with the Houston Texans, beforehand. There's a number of the guys that they were in contact with, there who are recognizable, and I'll just, give you a couple, things there that, stood out to me. Nelson Spruce, who you mentioned, XFL guy, who clearly, would have been a guy that you could look at that day. The speed that Quadarius Smith has, he's a 4.3 kid, but he was running, a lot of different routes. And the thing that you got was, this isn't about running a 40 and doing a vertical or a broad jump, which last time I looked, that wouldn't make for good TV or video if you were just watching a bunch of guys in shorts and T-shirts running around. Right, you had over 100 years of experience of former NFL coaches and players, a handful of guys that would have a handful of Super Bowl rings, to their credit. And the guy really leading that group is Jeep Christ, former NFL offensive coordinator. Brother is Paul Christ, the head coach at Wisconsin. So two things the guy's connected and he knows what he's doing. Because remember, this is a guy that was the OC in San Francisco when they were running this crazy offense with Colin Kaepernick that no one was ever going to run. Oh, well, except now everyone's running it. So you know what you're getting in terms of the coaching and what those guys were able to do. And some of those guys, Sammy Strouder, Eugene Chung, Dwayne Board, Junior Bryan, Tim McKyer, and then Nick Novak working with all the specialists. Again, you're talking about real guys who have real reputations in the league, who can take these kids for about an hour and change in each one of their groups, work with them, then do some one-on-ones and work collectively. But really, a lot of these kids are walking away with a better sense of who they are, what they need to do next. And then I think this can grow once the COVID stuff, starts getting more under control, to them doing a 2 or 3 day thing that would include this type of progression workout, to then maybe a Sunday scrimmage type thing that would provide the scouts film. But I think the thing I like the most is, if I was going there purely as an evaluator, I have the ability to just evaluate, because I'm not trying to go through the list and weed out the guys who can't play. Normally at events like this, things similar, they're inviting, but they're not doing really any of the legwork evaluation or vetting ahead of time. These are football guys running a football event, right? Tom Goodines running the Arena League office, running championship teams in the Arena League with the Philadelphia Soul. Don Yee happens to represent a guy that I think goes by a 4-letter word, the GOAT. Yeah, that's his agent. Tom Brady's agent is Don Yee. This is the guy who's running it. So you're getting quality players that are vetted in an opportunity to work them out. You know that they're symptom-free, which is really important when we're talking about what's happened with the Titans and some of these other, situations. And then the broad variety of saying, there's NFL free agents, there's XFL players, there's the opt-out CFL young players, that are available. And now there's college kids from the fall who aren't playing, and college guys come the spring who, if you opt out because of the NFL draft, there's only going to be so many opportunities available to you. If this turned out to be one of them, it's a really good opportunity, to look at. And what I'm expecting is, I would expect this to now be something where I would expect one to come next month before the holidays. I would expect something December, January that might be more inclusive of both free agents and college, or more college type driven, which will be very interesting because it's going to be a necessity this year for the NFL. So if you can graduate a bunch of these guys into one scenario and put it together in that kind of format, I could see it being very, very helpful to the NFL and very helpful to the late round priority free agent guys who were the players, and those agents took it the hardest in the draft. No pro day, no opportunities for rookie mini camps. Something like the hub could really help narrow that gap down and help a lot of those younger free agent guys, that'll be in this year's draft, not have the chance to get overlooked, or not, actually provide them with an opportunity to get, looked at a showcase like this, because the NFL can do their 40s and do all that stuff on their own. They don't need somebody to do that part for them. The promotion of this, right, the ability to have people there, the ability to do what we're going to do now with this information post the workout, health coach Chris and Nick Novak and some of the players and agents that were involved in it, to talk about why would you come to this event? What did you think you got out of it? And then look at how they can improve moving forward. I think this is something that has real legs to it, not only because of the COVID situation, but then moving forward when we get off of it. The hub football idea could be there just like the spring. Like you could have both of those two things going at the same time, because I think they both have different agendas and different ideas of how they're running their product.
Yeah, and I will say this. There's nothing worse than going to these type of workouts where you've got to go through 140-yard dashes to get through the one or two guys that you actually want to see run, right? And then, again, we talked about it last week. Less is more. Give us the quality guys who deserve a look. Give them a taste of what it's like to be coached by the pros. The coaching staff is phenomenal there, okay? And then your point, these guys coming up, hubfootball.com, by the way, I think they're already taking registrations for their next event. I would love to see, as somebody who organizes the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, I'm being told these FCS guys with pro aspirations, they're not participating in a spring league. So how cool would it be to have something in the 2020 calendar year before the All-Star Game circuit that I can get a look at some of these FCS guys that, hey, might have a chance to be invited then to the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. That would provide a huge value not only to the NFL teams, but also to the All-Star Games here as we try to figure out our rosters here for the month of January. I will say this. We'll have updates throughout the week here on the State of Football. We'll be talking about it on NFLDraftBible.com. Hopefully we can get some of these coaches on the show to talk more about some of the results. Of course, a handful of NFL teams in attendance. NFL Draft Bible on location, exclusive coverage there. So hubfootball.com, make sure you follow them. HubFootball 2020 on Twitter. And, of course, NFLDraftBible.com for the exclusive coverage. John, we went a little overtime like we always do on Mondays. That's what we do here on the State of Football Part 46. We'll be back tomorrow with Russell Landy, of course, of the Calgary Stampeders, Infectious Scouting GM Jr., to kind of break down all the NCAA action that was this past weekend.
Absolutely. And one thing we found out, once again, for the 20th time, if you are a former assistant of Nick Saban and you leave to go do your own thing, there's one thing you're going to come back with down the road, and that is likely an ass kicking, because that's what he gave. And he is now 20-0. So Georgia and Tennessee, you got a shot to possibly at some point put a W on the board there for your former assistant coaching, crew and alumni. But if you leave Alabama, it's probably for greener pastures in terms of a paycheck, not greener pastures in terms of getting a victory over Nick Saban as he improved to 20-0. But a lot of exciting and interesting things went on in the college football weekend, and now a very interesting next couple of weeks coming up as the rest of the conferences are, we're now into October. So amazingly, you could say the rest of college football is probably back practicing at full speed, and we'll get back up and running at the end of the month. So that'll be exciting to follow that. And like you said, this is an exciting idea because you're thinking outside the box, right? And we've all had to do that. Hell, that's how this show is on the air. Is a couple of Northeast guys thinking outside the box and trying to find something to do with their time. And I think that, they're really onto something. So it was exciting last weekend to find out that the Spring League's going to be on TV, because what we need to do, everybody can compete for the 30 minutes or the 60 minutes or the 4 hours when you're playing. Whatever you're doing, you can be successful doing it without putting something else or without pushing something else down, right? We have to get very much used to, in our business, bringing things up, right? And that's one of the things, I mean, you're there and you're my boy, so it's no doubt I'm going to share it. But look at what we're doing. And we have, we've talked about the Spring League. We've talked about the Hub Football and given them, their shine. Neil Stratton's on with us. Justin's on with us. Two different Big Daddy and Barry Ozer, who that would be an interesting UFC match, if we could ever set it up. The factor that you could take all those different components in people and have them put aside their individuality to join and be a part of one thing that's hoping to service so many different parts of the football element and world, that's the real thing that I really liked about hearing from these guys over the weekend. They're not trying to compete with the Spring League. They're not trying to hope that somebody else, doesn't have success. They have their own idea. They know how to put it in place. And the more opportunities we can give players, which then is helping the agent community, the trainers stay in business, financial advisors stay in business, and groups like us, just have more content to work with and talk about. That's the best thing we could do for each other, in this time frame of COVID, is to be supportive of each other. And then, hey, when it's time to get on the field, Russ is just going to have to take that ass whipping the way I'm going to give it to him.
No doubt. And I will say, you know, when you got someone like Don Yee, the agent for Tom Brady, the agent for Sean Payton, here's a guy that's just so well connected. When he picks up the phone, he's going direct to the GM, right? So if you showed up and showed out, here's a guy that can get you a look. Oh, by the way, 8 coaches with NFL experience, multiple Super Bowl winners. These guys are connected too. Oh, by the way, a guy by the name of John Murphy was on location. He's somewhat connected as well. Of course, NFLDraftBible.com, bringing you the names you need to know first since 2002. We saw the value and importance of what just one look could be because North Dakota State, oh, by the way, trotted out a football team this past Saturday to play one game. I saw it. It was on ESPN3. I'll have my takeaway on tomorrow's show. Of course, NFLDraftBible.com, your home for the virtual NFL Draft Bible, now featuring over 300 scouting reports. So get into that. Of course, we're giving away Scout Speak. You mentioned Neil Stratton. Subscribe all access to the NFL Draft Bible. Get a free copy while limited editions last of Scout Speak. Again, shout out to Ralph Ventri, co-commissioner of the Northeast Conference. John Murphy, my co-host each and every day here on the State of Football, weekdays 9 a.m. Eastern. And, of course, Ric Serritella telling it like it is.